Welcome, everybody. Topic that I think is so relevant right now that I'm hearing a lot about with clients that I have is around performance management and some of the challenges that we have with that. So what I wanted to do is hopefully provide a different perspective on performance management, or at least bring in some different pieces that you might find beneficial in terms of how you go about it. And we're going to talk about in two perspectives. One, we're going to talk about just general performance management, but also what I want to talk about is what are some strategies we can do for individuals that are challenges for us, and maybe around more along the lines of difficult employees or performance improvement that needs to be done with employees. So you can see here, I've got the objectives already up in regards to what we'll do. We'll talk about some of the challenges that I think employees face in regards to going into performance management, and we'll talk about some social needs, and we'll also talk about a model that I have found really valuable, and it's a model called motivational interviewing. And it's interesting because it's a model that was initially, I should say, used in the healthcare industry, or the profession, I should say, in regards to addiction counseling. But it really has a lot of crossovers now, and we'll talk about why that is and how to use it in performance improvement. So let me shuffle around a little bit. I'll make the slides larger. So as we move on, I want to talk about what are called social needs first, because I think this is really important in terms of the setup to understand what's going on. So you can see here, what are social needs? Needs are an acronym for these sort of 5 domains of social need. One is around network, one is around empowerment, one is around equity, one is around dignity, and one is around stability. And there's a lot of research and work that's been done in regards to social needs and the importance of it. David Rock is a neuroscientist. He's done a lot of work in this area. He has a model called SCARF, very similar to this, that I've really sort of looked at a lot of the research that he's done and others in terms of this space. And again, when I work with my clients, I will either talk about it as SCARF, or I talk about it as needs, because I think needs is, for me at least, easier to understand. Like, what are the needs of my employees? So when we talk about network is really about a sense of individuals, employees needing to feel a connection, sense of belonging with the person that they report to, and that's you. You're the manager, you're the supervisor of this individual if you're doing the performance management on them. And the better we are at creating a sense of connection with that person, the more engaged they're going to be. The book that I wrote a little over 2 years ago is called The Leadership Bridge, and that book, it really is about how to engage your employees and drive organizational excellence. And in that, I talk about a model that I use called CABLES, which is around 6 behaviors that are all researched, but it also speaks to the social needs that employees have. And if we don't understand those social needs, I think either performance management, I think in onboarding employees, it's really important to recognize these social needs. We're missing opportunities to engage with individuals. And if people aren't engaged, then we're not going to really be able to connect with them. And we're not going to get the best out of them. And I don't mean that from the standpoint of a piece of machinery, but I mean, we're just not going to get the best out of the relationship either. So that's the first one, network. The next one is around empowerment. And this really is the need for individuals to feel as though they have some control over their destiny. And again, that's not to say everybody gets to show up at work and do whatever they want, but it's a need that we have to feel as though we have some control over what we're doing. And it doesn't have to be either or. As a supervisor, I can give direction to somebody, right? So that I'm sort of setting expectations for them, but I can provide autonomy for them as well, where I could say, look, if this needs to be done by the end of the week or the end of the month, right? I set the expectation, but then I could say, how do you think you're going to be able to accomplish that? That provides the autonomy back to them, where they're able to talk through, like, this is how I'm going to do it. So we both win in that situation. So again, a really important one. The next is equity. And this really is a sense of individuals wanting to feel as though there's a sense of fairness, that people on the team or in the organization, we follow the same rules, that we're all treated the same way. And again, if you think about this from the standpoint of our performance management, fairness can be, certainly perceived fairness can be really high or low in this situation where somebody feels or hears that somebody else, their review went much better than yours did, and you're thinking, that person's thinking, I did all of those things. How come my review wasn't as good as theirs, right? So equity becomes really important. The next is dignity. And that's the really need for an individual to feel valued, to feel respected, to feel appreciated. So if we think about performance management, if we think about performance improvement, dignity is an important social need, that people want to feel as though that they are valued and they are appreciated for what they're doing, even if there are areas that need to be developed. I still want to feel overall, I want to leave that meeting feeling good about myself and not sort of feeling as though, I'm not fit to be in this position or I'm not viewed that way anyway. And then the last is stability, which really is about wanting to feel as though almost a sense of predictability. Like I know who my manager is. I know how they show up. I know what's expected of me, so that hopefully when performance management is done, we're working through that, it's not a surprise in terms of how I was going to be evaluated. And I will tell you, that's one thing that I experienced myself, as well as probably one of the common themes that I have, is that people at the end, when they actually have their reviews, are like, I didn't even know that was an expectation, or I was going to be rated on that. And that, again, impacts predictability. I don't feel as though I really understand what the expectations are. So again, an important one, right? Each of those domains, the important thing here is that when they're satisfied, people become more engaged, they become more collaborative. When they're disengaged, a couple different things can happen. Or when they're not met, right? An employee can either become disengaged, which the majority will just become disengaged, but there is a subset of disengaged employees that we call actively disengaged. And those are ones that will start acting out and be disruptive because these social needs have not been met for them. So what's the benefit of it, right? Well, when we satisfy these social needs, we improve communication, we build better relationships with people, and we create an environment where people are more engaged and more collaborative. So let's take a look at some of the challenges, right, that employees are faced in regards to going through performance management or performance reviews, right? Lack of objectivity, right? Employees often perceive performance reviews as subjective, that there are personal biases, and we'll talk to those. The other is infrequency, right? That performance reviews become maybe a once a year exercise that people do. Or maybe twice a year at best. And we're missing real opportunities to have real development when we do that. Because if you think about it in this way, if I was on the East Coast in the US and I pointed my car west and said, I'm going to drive to Lake Tahoe, it's going to take me 12 days to get there, and I'm pointed directly in that direction. If I were to be able to drive for 11 days and then get out of my car, what's the likelihood that I'm going to be one day away from getting to Lake Tahoe? Probably not that great, right? I'm somewhere along that way. Even if I veered off just a little bit, it's going to take me longer. And the point of this is to say that really that's the way performance management is often done, right? We set some goals, and then we put this thing away, and it doesn't get reviewed for 11 more months. Well, the likelihood of anything that we talked about in that being relevant in 11 months is a lot more difficult, because there was no time to course correct. If I'm off, I can't really make up that time. Whereas if I got out on a more regular basis to sort of observe, survey where I am, that provides me an opportunity to course correct all along the way and to understand the environment that I'm in. So we'll come back to that one in a minute, right? Performance reviews that focus on the negatives, right? And again, we can talk about it in terms of in a minute, how these all impact our levels of engagement. When we're inconsistent in terms of what the review process is looking like, standards change, criteria changes. I think the next one is really important here too, when it seems like it's one-way communication. And I will say that, again, from conversations I've had and certainly my own experiences, that performance management is often something that's done to someone and not done with them. And there's a huge difference if we want to talk about motivation and intrinsic motivation, that if something is done to you, if you're told what you're going to do, that is different than having a conversation about where your performance has been and where you want it to go. So the next one is insufficient guidance, right? Employees feel that there's not clear expectations. And again, we're going to talk about that in terms of how that impacts those social needs. And then the last is this idea of a disconnect from the actual performance. And again, back to looking at it from the standpoint of a bias, right? And in the sense that maybe we as an employee and a supervisor, more recently, things have not gone as well between us, but I've got 10 months of positive reviews or experience, and those things get overshadowed by what is going on most recently. And that's a real thing, and we'll sort of review that in a second here. So how do needs show up in performance, right? So we talked about lack of objectivity, right? Well, fairness, equity comes into play here. Employees perceive the evaluation process as unfair due to personal biases. Infrequency, that goes to stability. There's not predictability in this, right? When we get together, there's an uncertainty about where we are. Focusing on negatives, that impacts somebody's level of dignity, respect, appreciation, their status when we only focus on the negatives. Inconsistency, again, fairness can come into play on that one. Stability, again, can come into play on that one. When it seems to be one-way communication, as I mentioned before, it's not done with me, it's done to me, then we're going to run into areas where people don't feel as though they're empowered. They have any control over this. They lack autonomy. And also they don't feel a connection with the person. There's no sense of belongingness or network with the individual when I'm, with the supervisor or the manager, when I'm just being talked to rather than we're talking about or you're talking with me. Insufficient guidance, right? Again, no clear expectations is really where this goes. When I don't have really good feedback in terms of what the expectation is and how I'm going to get there, and we don't agree on that. And then the last is the disconnect from actual performance, where biases do come into play, and this will impact on a level of fairness for people, and I think also in regards to a level of dignity or feeling respected, appreciated, valued, all of those things. So again, you can see where performance management, and again, the same thing. We can talk about this from onboarding people I'll have that in a different conversation, but those needs, those 5 social needs, all play heavily in terms of how somebody experiences an organization as it relates to onboarding. So challenges for evaluators, right? Well, what is some of the research out there? And I think these are important for us to recognize, right? I've highlighted a few of them. This one was Journal of Applied Psychology, found that evaluators tended to give more weight to recent events. And I kind of mentioned that in the past, right? So this next one, Academy of Management Journal, study there found that evaluators were less likely to rate employees negatively for a performance issue if there was a longer time lag. So again, we know that time is not our friend oftentimes when we're going to accurately manage somebody's performance. And that's why when we wait too long to do it, we really open ourselves up to issues where it's not going to be seen as fair, it's going to be seen as arbitrary. And ways around this are to make these more frequent. I was talking to somebody that I'm doing work with a few days ago, and she said she meets every quarter to review this, which I will tell you, even that I thought was probably a little light in terms of what would work. But she said it's been really good. So I would, in our conversation, she was very specific in terms of what she set up for expectations and how they were going to go through this, so that there really is a collaboration between the two. And she said when they get to the year ends for them, this is the first year she has done it. She's like, there's no surprises for individuals because they've had conversations throughout the process. So you can see here I talk about subjectivity, right? Journal of Management found that subjective ratings for performance more strongly related to evaluators' perceptions of the employee's behaviors or attitudes. So, right, somebody, and this could be personality too. We don't sort of see things the same way. That is going to leak into potentially how you get evaluated. And I think that's, again, one of those that it's important for us to realize. And a lot of the work that I will do from a leadership standpoint with supervisors, there's always a piece that we will explore a lot of the unconscious biases that are out there and how they play into many of the behaviors we don't want to see in other people. We actually encourage based on how we perceive other people. And that really is part of unconscious biases, and whether it's Pygmalion or confirmation bias or several others that we talk about. Right. So again, you can probably see the theme here, right? Annual review of psychology, often influenced by evaluators' biases, perceptions, personal relationships with employees. We know that happens, right? And we're human. So again, I think the biggest thing that we can do is to recognize that we do have these biases that come into play. I think the more frequent we are in terms of meeting with individuals, the more we're able to, I think, immunize ourselves to this happening. So, managing performance. What are some of the most important things that I think we need to do? One is setting clear expectations. We'll talk about that in a minute. Regular feedback. I mentioned that, and then the last is what's next. Right, focusing on continuous improvement. So the first part, right, establishing clear expectations. Well, at the beginning of each performance cycle, again, I personally think it's best if we can do it once a month. Is a great way to sort of revisit performance with individuals. And I know some of you up there might be thinking, I don't have time to do it at the end of the year, let alone doing this once a month. And I'm going to really push on this to say that I think it's counterintuitive that actually to do it more often is actually easier than doing it at the end of the year. And even if it's not a little bit easier, it's certainly more effective, which really isn't that the goal of why we're managing performance in the first place. Not just to check the box exercise, but we really want this to be meaningful. Well, if we want it to be meaningful, then let's stop doing it at month 11. Or at month 6 and 11, and make this thing that it can be something that is really going to be valuable for both the manager and the employee, right? So here we are at the beginning, right? Mutually establish. So mutually establish, not me telling you, we're going to mutually establish this. And there's a reason for that we'll talk about in terms of how that motivates people, right? If employee's a salesperson, right? We talk about obviously target sales per month, but also maybe even some things within that in terms of the quality of the orders that go in, and the process with how they go in can be part of setting clear expectations. Because maybe they're really good about the sale, but the follow through after that, they tend to drop the ball. They put too much pressure on maybe their admins or those in customer service to be able to sort of clean up their messes. So that might be an area that we need to set clearer expectations on. Right, you're really good at getting the sale. You've just got to be better at not making everybody else have to do the work that you didn't do in getting the sale. Regular feedback, right? As we schedule one-on-one meetings, we're going to discuss performance. Have specifics in terms of the data, what's going on, so that you can have real conversations about this in terms of just check-ins where we are. And then as part of those check-ins, we're going to talk about what's next. So here's a way that we can do, and I call these laser check-ins, right? Where these are not drawn out meetings. These are just sort of quick pulse checks. Where are we, right? What progress have you made over your goals since our last meeting? What challenges have you encountered in the work? How have you addressed them? How do you feel about your performance over the last month? What will you work on in the coming month? Anything that I can do for you? What do you need? Right? That is just a very sort of a check-in, and hopefully, right, as we go month to month, this is the person saying, "Here's what I'm committed to doing next month." Okay, done. All we're doing is, did you do it? Didn't you do it? Okay, if you didn't, what got in your way? What are you going to do to sort of make up for that for the coming month? And this is just this quick sort of a process we're doing. And the importance of this, again, the more frequently that we do these sort of quick laser check-ins, it provides an opportunity for, if there are things that need to be worked on and developed, there's no surprise at the end of the year if I were to say, we talked about this, and the last 6 out of the 8 months that we had this conversation, you did not meet the expectation on this, right? And these conversations we had on a regular basis. So there's no surprise for this individual in terms of what the process is and how they're being evaluated on this. So the last part of this is really continuing to focus on continuous improvement. where do they go from here? What other resources can I provide for them, or development opportunities that will help them get where they want? So we set clear expectations in the beginning. We have regular feedback. And then as we're sort of working through the year, what other things, resources can I provide for you, or do you need that will help you get to where you need to go, or hopefully surpass where you need to go? So the next part is really about how do we deal with what we would call the underperformer. And I'm going to speak to this from this model called motivational interviewing. As you can see here, it's a collaborative, goal-oriented approach to coaching that aims to elicit and strengthen the person's motivation for change, right? And I think a couple of the key things here is that it's collaborative and that it's goal-oriented. Where are we going with this? And as I mentioned, this is based on really some work that was done. This book is from 2008. It's one of the first books that I read by, Stephen Rolnick and William Miller. So Miller and Rolnick are the ones that are probably most recognized for the concept of motivational interviewing. It has spread in so many different areas now. I use it with athletes too. There's actually a book that had come out that William Miller, I believe, is the author that actually wrote that book as well. But it goes into how do you use this with athletes in terms of helping them to improve their performance. And what I want you to think about in terms of this has been used a lot in addiction counseling. It's where it's had most of its success. And I think there are many similarities if you think about it this way. Anybody, sadly, that might know somebody that has an addiction, oftentimes that person would say, this is not a problem. They don't see what they're doing as a problem oftentimes. Again, I think if we were to talk about underperformers or challenging employees, many times they probably don't think that they have a problem either. It's somebody else's problems, and probably it's you, the manager. It's your problem in terms of how you're evaluating them. So that's why I think this model is it overlays very well with managing the underperformer. I use this quite a bit, and I'm doing this right now with one of my larger clients in terms of their supervisors. And what I will tell them as we're going through this is you don't need to be an expert in motivational interviewing to do this. That as we go through this, maybe there are just pieces of this that you can assimilate into how you manage an underperformer. And at least you look at this from the standpoint, this is a validated model in terms of how to do this. So you know that there's some research or validation behind why this process works. So what's the impact for the employee when we go this approach using motivational interviewing? Well, first is that we hit on intrinsic motivation. And I think I mentioned earlier, right? Anytime that we can get an employee to want to go where we're asking them to go, that's intrinsic motivation, right? As opposed to me telling them why they're going to do something, that's extrinsic. That is, they're going to do it because I have authority over them. They're afraid they'll be retaliated against if they don't or punished. So they do it. But in a sense, it's not going to land the same way because they feel like they're forced into doing it. So my goal is I want to find as many opportunities as I can to get them to want to go where I'm asking them to go. So the next thing here is this model, as we mentioned, it's collaborative, that it fosters ownership, that they really start to design their own solution to this problem. And I think that's really important for us to provide them the opportunity to do that. And again, this is working with them as well as directing at them. So we reduce resistance, right? Which obviously makes sense. If they're the ones talking about the problem and how they can improve it, they're doing the talking, not me telling them why they need to do this. And then the last thing I think it does is it helps to create clarity, right? Increasing the understanding of the problem that their behavior has had, right? They get to see the impact and talk through even though they thought it wasn't a problem, as they reflect on it, they can see where, this behavior probably is not the best behavior that I've ever had. And it does need to change because this is the impact that it's having, even though I didn't want to recognize it at first. So step one in this, and this has the most bullet points because I think it's the most important part, right? Preparation. As with anything, is so important. And this starts with reviewing the employee's performance data, right? I want to have actual examples that I want to talk to them about, right? And because I have that data now, I'm going to be able to identify gaps, right? What's the gap between where they are currently and where they need to be? What's the desired performance metric that we need to look at? The next thing I think is really important, this third bullet point, is to think about the employee's strengths. And we'll talk about that in a minute and why that's important. It comes back to biases that we might have. If I go into this thinking this employee is only a problem, that this is an ongoing issue with this person, I miss opportunities to look at this person and say, you know what, there probably are things that they have done or are continuing to do that are positive, and I need to be able to sort of think those to stay sort of balanced on this. So the next is we schedule a private time uninterrupted so that we can have this conversation. You'll see next here I have used ChatGPT as a resource. For those of you that might have seen other workshops that I've done several on using ChatGPT, either in sales or in leading. I think this is a great opportunity to use this as it relates to performance management, especially with motivational interviewing, because as we go through this, you might say, boy, this seems complicated at times. Well, that's to me where ChatGPT can become a real valued tool in this, where I could do what's called a persona prompt in ChatGPT, and I could ask ChatGPT to act as an expert in motivational interviewing. And based on this employee and the challenge that I'm having with this person, how would you recommend using motivational interviewing in this situation? And it will literally outline this process of motivational interviewing in terms of how motivational interviewing could be effective with this employee. Now, from there, the benefit is that I can drill down into each of those where I could say, could you provide some questions that I could ask around developing discrepancy or around creating change talk, which are a couple of the components of this, right? So there's a lot of value to this that you can use. Last part here is prepare for the worst. And again, I think as we go through this and you prepare and you think, I've got great examples and I'm able to demonstrate a clear sort of story here on where there are gaps, that I might go into this overly optimistic that this employee is going to see it the same way. And I think I should be prepared for, what am I going to do if they completely resist on this? If they tell me to go to hell or something along those lines, or they say the problem is you, not me. Because I think if I don't prepare for that and I go into this sort of not having thought that might be the case, that could derail me when we get into that conversation. And then I might say or do things that I then wish I hadn't done. So it's a way to prepare for worst case scenario. So if they do show up, I can navigate through those without sort of getting derailed on where we're going to go on this conversation. So the next part of this is around using the motivational techniques. So expressing empathy, developing discrepancy, rolling with resistance. And then this last one, what we call supporting self-efficacy. So if we were to talk about expressing empathy, well, this can be as simple as, right, acknowledging the challenges of their jobs, right? I start this conversation out by saying, you know what, I know this job can be tough, frustrating at times. Or, you know what, I might say, these are not conversations that I enjoy needing to have. Or of all the things that I do, this is probably what I enjoy doing least. And the reason I might prompt it that way is because when I'm demonstrating empathy, the first one, I know this job can be difficult or tough at times. What I'm trying to do is reduce their defensiveness, right? By recognizing, I understand that this is not an easy job at times. And that helps to sort of take the pressure off of them, of feeling like I'm just going to come in and I don't know what you have to deal with, and I don't appreciate your, all the challenges and the requests and responsibilities that you have. I'm opening up with that. And I think the most important thing is, after I do that, the next thing that I do is I stay quiet. Uncomfortably quiet, because if I do that long enough, that other person is going to say something. They will respond some way in that. And to me, that is the opportunity now to just listen to what they're doing, not to judge them, not to interrupt them, but just to listen to what they're going to say. And again, I think this is the important part of or the skill that's involved, not just in listening, but in using it in motivational interviewing. Next part is around developing discrepancy, right? That I might say I've noticed there have been changes in your quality standards. It gives an opportunity to sort of, I'm showing that gaps now, right? The research that I had done or the examples that I had, I'm starting to talk about them now. The next part, right? Link their performance to personal statements that they've made, right? Where I might say, I know you mentioned that you wanted to be a team leader. And that's really part of this conversation, is that based on your performance right now and where you want to go, there is a gap in terms of you being able to get to that next point. So what I'm doing is developing discrepancy, right? They told me they want to be a leader. Well, to be a leader, here are a couple things that still need to be worked on. Or, you know what, you mentioned in our first conversation when we met and you took on this responsibility that I could count on you to do this, right? Well, what's changed? Because we're kind of at a place right now where some of those things have not happened, right? So that gives an opportunity to, again, remind them of what they said that they were going to be responsible for, and where are they now? So the next part is what we call rolling with resistance. And this is when people might disagree, they become defensive. The key here is not to argue with them, right? And again, that's part of the preparation here. Instead, what I want to do is really try and create open-ended questions. So I might say, well, can you give me what you think is going on? Tell me how you see this situation, right? And from that, I might say, as it says here, it seems like you feel your work quality meets the standards, and be prepared for them to say, yeah, actually, I do. Okay. Well, you know what? Well, most of your performance is good. There are a couple areas that we do need to discuss, and that's really what the purpose of this meeting is. Right. So I'm not being derailed. I prepared for this, and I'm just going to roll into the next piece of this. So this next part is what we call supporting self-efficacy. And this is about really expressing my belief that they can do this, right? I've seen the type of work that you've done before. I know what type of employee you are. You're a hard worker, right? You are a courteous individual. I've seen how you generally treat other people. This is not, who you are that we're having this conversation. I recognize that. However, we're going to talk about how we get back to where you are, right? So the other part of this is, tell me, what do you think you might be able to do? What are some of the changes that you think might be necessary? Reflective listening, important tool for us to use here, right? Person says, I'm struggling with the work because of the new procedures, right? And I might go along the line something like, I just want to try and understand this. So which part of the procedure do you think is most challenging for you? And again, reflective listening is really just an opportunity for me to demonstrate to them, I'm truly trying to understand your perspective. I'm not going to counter argue it at this point. I'm really just trying to understand where you are. So if I understand this correctly, the new design, safety gear is impacting your work speed. What parts are most challenging, right? You can see, again, this is a partnership. We're on the same team here. I want you to succeed, but I need to understand better on what's created this gap in performance recently. So some other areas or ways that we can encourage what's called change talk, and I've just given you some examples here. I will tell you one of my favorites is the commitment one, where it says on a scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you to make this change? Or how confident are you that you can make this change? And I think the key here is that if somebody were to say it's a 7, my natural inclination is to say, well, okay, what do you think would get you to a 10? And I don't want to go there first, because that can be a really difficult jump. But what I want to do is I want to get them to speak about the importance of this. So in doing this, I would say, I think 7 is great based on the conversation we've had. Just out of curiosity, how come you didn't say a 5? And generally what you will have them do at this point is they then have to sell themselves and you on why this is important, why this is more important than a 5. And then once they're sort of speaking about that this is important, that there is value to what the change is about, then I might say, okay, that's, certainly I appreciate that. What do you think it would take just to go to an 8? What would need to happen? Because now they're already moving in that direction. It's not like I'm forcing them there. They're already talking positively. So it provides a more strategic way of me sort of building on, again, what they're telling me is important. So next part, right, is about helping the employee identify specific actions, right? So what steps could you take to improve? What support or resources do you need for improvement, right? So I'm really helping them at this point. Again, this is collaborative. This is not, I'm telling you, these are the steps you're going to take. This is the support that you're going to get. We're having a conversation about this. So as we start to wrap up this conversation, right, we've talked about the strategies, what we're going to do. We summarize this conversation. This is what we've talked about. This was the issue that we're addressing. Here's what you've committed to in terms of next steps and what how you're going to do this. And here's what I've committed to as well in this, right? I've offered my support, my resources. You see, I've highlighted here, right? Express your confidence in their ability to do that. And I think this is so important, right? That I respect and really value that you have taken the time to do this and taken this seriously. And I have full confidence that you're going to get back to where you were in terms of performance. And as you know, I'm here to support you on that. So as we wrap up, right, the follow-up is hugely important here, right, is that I monitor their performance. I provide feedback. I provide recognition. I think as soon as I see them doing things that are in line with what they committed to, I need to recognize them for that. I think we miss huge opportunities here if we have the mindset of, why would I recognize somebody for just doing what their job is, for what they should have been doing in the first place? That is sort of flawed logic, is that I want to reinforce, like, I've noticed the difference, I appreciate it, and it reinforces to them and makes them feel good too, as well as that they want to continue to do this, right? So the last part here is again, it highlights, is to be consistent on this, is to, anytime there are gaps in this, you will tend to sort of go backwards. It needs to be consistent, just like performance management needs to be more consistent. So as we wrap up here, right, employee challenges, there are a number of them, right, from objectivity to infrequency. We need to recognize what those are, that there are challenges to this process, that there are social needs that we need to meet when we're doing that, whether it's creating a network, having people feel empowered, having people feel that there's equity in the process, providing dignity for them, that they feel valued and respected, and also providing stability, that they understand like what the expectations are and how they're going to be evaluated. Regular check-ins, another thing that's totally relevant and necessary. And then lastly, for those individuals that there are performance issues that need to be dealt with, I challenge you to explore motivational interviewing as a tool, as one more tool in your box that you can use in terms of getting people to want to make the changes that you feel need to be made. So I hope you found this valuable. If you have questions, reach out to me. I'm always interested. There are three newsletters that I'm now writing, all based on what I do is take one study and just speak about the impact that has. I have one that's called Rise Above Your Best, which is around personal development. I have one which is called The Complete Leader, which is about leadership, research, and strategies that you can employ. And then the last one is What Great Teams Do. And those are on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So I hope you'll have a chance to read those and subscribe. And as we move on, rise above your best.